बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। अस्सलामुअलैकुम। आप देख रहे हैं DDP एनालिटिका। टुडे it is 23rd February and today the women in Kashmir had celebrated the Resistance Day, Women's Resistance Day in Kashmir. What is the significance? Kunaan, Poshpora. These are the two adjacent villages, and these are the focus of the activity today, and every year on 23rd February this day is celebrated. Kashmir, where Indian Army has been subjecting the civilian population, particularly the women and the children, to the most barbaric atrocities. UN Human Rights Watchdog in their recent report has documented most of the brutal acts of violence perpetrated by the Indian forces against the Kashmiri men, women and children. But due to the indifference of the international community, the occupational forces have not changed their ways. It is still continuing. There are innumerable heart-touching stories of Indian Army's tyranny and criminal activities against the Kashmiris. But what happened on the cold night of 23rd February 1991 was so devastating and shameful that even after the passage of 3 decades, the people of Kashmir have not been able to recover from the traumatic effects of that incident. Kunaan and Poshpora, two adjoining villages in India's illegally occupied Kashmir, were raided that night by more than 300 personnel of the Indian Army. The male members of the families were forced out of the houses. They were separated, taken to some places outside, and over 100 girls and women were raped during the night. The men, totally unaware of what was happening to their women folk, were tortured and electrocuted in the nearby barns. The next morning, as one can well imagine, was shame and paralyzing pain which was prevailing all over the village. Only 40 of the women who were raped stepped forward to seek justice, and the majority of the others were advised by the village elders against doing so, as they were unmarried and they wouldn't be able to find their grooms in the days to come. With the passage of time, 5 of the women who were raped by the army personnel had died. Many of the men who were tortured and electrocuted, they also died. Those who survived this horrific incident and are still alive are still fighting for the justice. These women, with their wounded souls and tearful eyes, have been repeatedly recounting the painful events of that night to anyone and everyone who had reached out to them. But it is only the Indian state which has intentionally opted to stay in a state of denial. Even the Indian civil society, which usually has been reacting sharply against such incidents in the mainland. Particularly, we saw 1 or 2 incidents recently where the entire Indian community, they were there on the roads and protesting against it. They were demonstrating. But here in this case, we saw the complete indifference. And these people who were subjected to mass rape, they could not get the attention of the people of India. Now, fed up with the careless attitude of the government of India, a group of young Kashmiri women decided to file a petition in the Indian-held Kashmir High Court. They filed the petition in 2013 and requested the court to reopen the case. After a long and difficult process, the Jammu and Kashmir High Court directed the state of Jammu and Kashmir to pay compensation to the victims who had gone through this very horrific incident. The state government initially was ready. They agreed to pay the compensation, but later on, under the influence of Indian government, their pressure, they changed their mind, and instead of paying the compensation, they decided to go and appeal against the decision to the Supreme Court of India. And in the Supreme Court, right from those days till this day, the case is still pending. Kunaan Poshpora survivors have been staging regular protests, but their voices were always suppressed, and the mainstream media never played its due role to highlight the issue. Now, what is the Indian judiciary is doing? They have completely ignored the mass rape case of Kunaan and Poshpora is not a priority for them. Justice in a situation like this does not interest even the Supreme Court of India. Fight for justice is continuing as the case waits in the pages of the Supreme Court registry. Human rights watchdogs or the state human rights organization, they also got attracted because these women, they approached them and they requested them to investigate. And when they investigated, they found all the allegations were right. These are correct and true. But in spite of that, the case could not proceed or could not see the light of the day in the courts of justice. Women have little or no hope from the Indian judiciary, and they have only been deeply frustrated by the red tapeism and due to no progress. Their fight is not only for securing justice, but also for the acknowledgement of the incident, which perhaps the entire community is in denial, and most importantly, to act as a deterrent so that such incidents do not occur in future. These women are exhausted, but they are determined. They are determined to keep their fight going. That is why every year on 23rd of February, these young women, they celebrate this day of resistance. Indian Army's barbaric conduct is still continuing because of the immunity provided by the special laws. These laws, they give immunity to the Indian Army. They can do anything. In recent times, hundreds of Kashmiri youth have been blinded by pellet guns. Since 1991, India has been continuously increasing the strength of the troops which they have already deployed in the Kashmir Valley. And today, this area, Kashmir, is the most militarized area in the entire world. Thousands of men have since disappeared. Thousands of women have been raped, if not thousands, in hundreds, one may say. And thousands have died in extrajudicial killings and torture at the army camps where they were illegally detained. But it is the Kunaan Poshpora rapes of 1991 that epitomize the intensity of this oppression, with the Indian Army holding down Kashmir and its people against their will by force. Now, after the abrogation of Article 370 last year, the Indian Army had clamped down the entire valley, entire Kashmir, and people just couldn't come out. Their life became miserable. The children couldn't go to the school. They couldn't take their sick people to the hospitals. And simultaneously, the younger people, the young men, and also people belonging to the Hurriyat conference, they were raided, they were rounded up and taken to various jails in India. Their parents, their families, they just don't know their locations. It's a real situation which one may say will ultimately lead to genocide of the people. They have already started bringing in the non-Kashmiris into the valley to change the demographic structure of the valley. And if that happens, and ultimately if we have the majority of the non-Kashmiris settling down in Kashmir, then definitely this will lead to the genocide, because Kashmiris will resist, and Indian army and Indian government is going to use their full force, which will destroy the entire culture of the valley and also the population. We are heading towards a very serious, very dangerous situation. The international community must pay attention. International community must bring pressure onto the Indian government to force them to demilitarize the area, to restore the normal life of the people and business, and also ultimately allow them to use their choice so that they can pick up either Pakistan or India for the future and for the future generations. This is what I thought must be known to the rest of the world. We want to draw the attention. This much for today. Fauj Pakistan Zindabad, Pakistan Paindabad.